what is absolutely forbidden to eat for breakfast? Or in general, what is absolutely forbidden to eat if you have diabetes? That's an interesting topic for today. Let's figure this out together. So look, it is absolutely forbidden to skip breakfast and stay hungry in the morning. And the reason lies in how our digestive system works. All right, let's get started. Look, no matter how you live, no matter how we organize our meals or our entire lives, there is always one big pause in our eating routine. Our digestive system works non-stop. That is, peristalsis is constantly happening. Enzymes are constantly being produced in the stomach, pancreas, and liver, and bile is constantly being produced in the liver. Digestion in our body happens constantly, and the work of the digestive system is ongoing and never stops. Yes, there are periods when it is more active and periods when it is less active. For example, during sleep it still works, although not with the same intensity as, say, after eating. But because our digestive system and enzymes are produced constantly, it turns out that food intake should also be more or less constant. But people eat in portions, and from one portion to the next. During the breaks, the digestive system still keeps working. But it would actually be better for it if food intake happened continuously. And for us, when we eat, there is always one big break in our diet. That's nighttime. Well, at night we don't eat anything. But if I have dinner at 7 and breakfast at 7, that's 12 hours. 12 hours is a huge break in eating, basically half a day. And all this time, while I'm not eating anything, my digestive system keeps working. Okay, sure, there's peristalsis in the intestines, everything keeps moving. But enzymes also keep being produced. These are the glands of the digestive system, the liver and the pancreas. And the liver, for example, produces bile. But at that moment, the bile isn't being used. Then when the bile isn't being used, well, it's strong. It's an alkaline caustic substance. And this bile accumulates in a person's gallbladder. Now look, and in the morning, when a person wakes up after 12 hours of not eating, the enzymes haven't been used and they have a huge amount, a full gallbladder of bile collected. A very good analogy for the gallbladder is the urinary bladder. After all, the kidneys are constantly producing and forming urine, which then collects in the bladder and is expelled from the body in portions during urination. And now look, when there's a 12-hour pause in urination, I know it's hard for you to even imagine that right now. But just imagine that you haven't gone to the bathroom for 12 hours. Can you picture what's happening in your bladder, inside the bladder itself? Yes, it's a disaster. And exactly the same process happens with the gallbladder. Because overnight, the bile that has accumulated there has overfilled the gallbladder. And now in the morning, this bile demands something to digest. And that something to digest is the breakfast we eat. By the way, bile digests fatty foods. Bile digests fat. Bile and fat in Russian both start with the same sound. It's a 100% match. But bile is an emulsifier. It coats the fat, which helps the enzyme lipase to digest the fat. And that's why it's alkaline. And bile will be used up when I eat fatty food. And look, in the morning after about 12 hours, let's say you had dinner at 10, it doesn't matter. There's a very long gap between meals. And in the morning when you eat, bile is used and the enzymes from the pancreas are used to digest the food. And if a person doesn't have a proper breakfast in the morning so that all the enzymes are used up, then these enzymes will start to destroy, corrode, and digest the glands themselves. This happens to the pancreas. After this, the damaged pancreas becomes overgrown with connective tissue. On an ultrasound, it will appear hard and rigid, and they write pancreatic fibrosis, and the pancreas is of increased echogenicity, chronic pancreatitis. It is destroyed by its own enzymes, which were not used for digesting a proper breakfast. And in the gallbladder, yes, some of that bile will partially destroy the liver itself. Then it becomes overgrown with fatty tissue, and there will be fatty hepatosis, liver steatosis. And in the gallbladder itself, the prolonged retention of bile that hasn't been used leads to its condensation. That is, bile pigments begin to form like sand at the bottom of the gallbladder, and over time they stick together and form concretions, gallstones in the gallbladder. And the reason for the formation of gallstones is precisely that the bile was not regularly used up for digesting a fatty breakfast in a person. And then they find gallstones, scare and intimidate the person and say, let's just cut it out. You don't need it anyway. You don't understand what you need it for. Let's cut it out for you. You'll feel better. Well, let me tell you right away, guys, you definitely won't feel better. And after the gallbladder is removed, there are such severe disruptions in the functioning of the entire digestive system. It's the same bile stasis, the same fatty liver disease, the same pancreatitis. And this practice simply shows there's also the development of diabetes. You don't need to remove the gallbladder. Even gallstones can be treated. But remember, the greatest harm to the digestive system is not when you eat something you shouldn't, but when you don't eat what you actually need to eat. And what you need is to have a breakfast that uses up all the enzymes that were produced throughout the night. That's why breakfast should be as large as possible, because the gap between last night's dinner and this morning's breakfast is the longest. And during this pause, the most enzymes are produced. So breakfast should be the largest meal in terms of volume, a huge breakfast, a smaller lunch, and an even smaller dinner. Eat breakfast yourself, share your lunch with a friend, and give your dinner to your enemy. Dinner should be a small portion. Second point, breakfast must be fatty and filling. I don't want to get into the topic of what fatty food is right now. Fats can be plant-based, animal-based, dairy, and so on. But a fat-free dry breakfast does not promote a good release of enzymes from the gallbladder or bile. That's why breakfast should be hearty and fatty, definitely a fatty breakfast. And the most interesting thing, which people tend to ignore, is that breakfast should be as early as possible so that the bile that accumulated overnight is used up. And try to keep the gap between waking up and having breakfast as short as possible. Look, I always use this example. When a person wakes up, they haven't gone to the bathroom or urinated all night. How long do you need to wait before running to the bathroom? People tell me that's crazy. You shouldn't wait even a second. You need to run right away. And many even say you have to make it in time. Oh, you have to hurry, otherwise you might not make it. That's a problem. So it's exactly the same analogy with the gallbladder. When a person just wakes up, the gallbladder is already full, so there's no need to wait or pause before having breakfast right away. Breakfast should be as early as possible. In other words, it should be big, it should be filling, and it should be early. And now I'll tell you the most important thing. After eating, especially after breakfast, you absolutely must not allow yourself to get stressed. Because stress is the same thing as adrenaline and noradrenaline. They cause spasms of the sphincters, which prevent normal bile flow. And that's why when a person eats, rushes off and runs somewhere, they start to feel pain. Spasmodic pain in the right upper abdomen, biliary dyskinesia. And that's bad, that's wrong, that's pain. That's not how it should be. What you should do is the following. What you need to do is, this is what I always do. I use physiotherapy equipment for treatment. These are products made from turmanium ceramic. They are warm. I take a warm turmanium belt, for example, and after eating, you need to place it on your right hypochondrium and warm up the right hypochondrium, the area where the liver and gallbladder are located, for 20 to 30 minutes. This serves several purposes. First, warming up causes the bile ducts to expand, and the bile will flow freely into the intestines. But this should be done after eating so that there is something for the bile to digest. Second, the heat will cause good blood flow to that area. Because of this, all the enzymes and enzyme-producing glands will function better. In other words, the glands will work more efficiently, digestion will be of higher quality, and the food will be properly digested. And third, thanks to good blood circulation in the abdomen, all wounds and injuries there will also heal. This applies to pancreatitis, fatty liver disease, inflammation of the gallbladder, gastritis, and stomach ulcers. So it also helps heal all injuries. Just warm up the area for 20 to 30 minutes every time after eating. But I don't have time in the morning. That's exactly the point. The need to warm your abdomen after eating will force you to set aside 20 to 30 minutes so that after eating you don't rush off anywhere. That's the whole idea. When you give yourself rest after eating because you need to warm up your liver, this is another factor you need to consider. Don't rush off somewhere. Don't strain yourself. Don't do anything. This is the most important thing. You are in a state of rest after eating, which is exactly what is needed for proper digestion. That's why this warming up also serves to protect the person a little from the stressful factors of rushing off to work, which will definitely harm the digestive system, while what you need is to ensure it works well. That's why the worst thing you can do is skip breakfast entirely. That would be a big problem. That's the information for today from Dr. Golod.